correctly, and Nadezhda Povrosnik from Perm State University in Siberia, and Moises Rockenbach from University in Brazil, Gia Storti from France in Italy, and Arif Shaum from Qatar. And I suggest that Nadezhda, if she's ready, then she can start. Questions at the end, of course, of the whole panel. The floor is yours, Nadezhda.
Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to participate in the WARCnet event. And I would like to be in Arcos today and to give a talk in person at the beautiful venue. I'm sure it's beautiful. And I really hope that one day it will be possible to travel worldwide again. In my today talk, I will focus on the opportunities and challenges for research of web archival materials in Russia. First of all, I need to explain that Russia has not a national program of web preservation. The only more or less sustainable project in web archiving is the Russian National Digital Archive, which includes Project Preserved Government and some other collections on the archived web. And the project is devoted to the governmental web preservation, including accounts of some officials on Twitter. It's not an archive in a common sense, it's rather a repository, and some resources can be offered to the user by demand. So it's impossible to doing some search on the website or something. You can download some data sets, but most of all are on demand. It means that to study the Russian web in other areas such as media, culture, or economy, we have to rely on the efforts of foreign stakeholders, their programs of web preservation and projects such as Internet Archive, for example. The current situation in research of web or web archival material within the humanities is that the proportion of researchers is much larger in the study of live web, and very few people focus on the research of web archives. However, I strongly believe that it's more than possible to make a significant shift towards more attention to the archived web and web history. And I think that education is a core pillar in this process. And in general, Russia has a very long tradition of interdisciplinary courses in conjunction between information technologies and history. And for example, Moscow State University is a pioneering university in teaching historical information science. The term historical information science can be compared with digital history, and its historical faculty, the faculty of Moscow State University has the oldest department in Russia, which is called the Department of Historical Information Science. And this department is fully focused on teaching and research in the field of history and information technology. Some other universities a long time ago introduced courses on digital history and digital humanities to advance the field of web history. However, within the mentioned courses, topics on web history take a very low amount of hours in the classes. In general, to the issues of web history, researchers and teachers pay not much attention in Russia. Why? Let's talk about it a bit in more details. In Russia, the community of historians who uses digital methods is visible, but still it's not dominant. In most of Russian universities, it's not dominant. So we have some exclusions, but in general, That's it. A lot of researchers are focused on traditional qualitative approaches to historical research and do not enter the digital sphere at all. We can talk about the border between historical research and the acceptance of digital tools and methods. It is something about the need to master new skills and be open to new experiences. That's why we are talking about professional digital literacy in the broader sense. The other issues are really interconnected and relate to the specifics of the research tasks connected to contemporary history. Right now, I'd love to mention a person who inspired me to start the research of the archived web. And the first time I listened to her keynote speech at the DH conference in Amsterdam in 2018. So a great person, Professor Jane Winters, says, quite simply, where does new researcher, even one with the requisite degree of technical knowledge, start? So it's a very important question for the current discussion. Yes, it's uneasy to start at all in the web archival research and web historical research, because it's a really difficult task to raise the research question to the web archival material. It should be a new level of skills in digital source criticism, the ability to analyze the source base shaped under uneven rules, the opportunity to reveal multiple biases of the corpora, and much more. In the country that doesn't offer the researcher specific infrastructure and which doesn't archive the digital heritage first of all, I mean, the web heritage, the task of creating the suitable resource base means a hard job and a much more complicated process for raising research questions. It was a good idea to start from the very beginning by introducing the new master course on web history. The course developed under support by the Vladimir Potanin Foundation, and I highly appreciate that support. The main idea of the course is to engage the students deeper with web archives as a historical resource. So the students became more familiar with the structure of web archives, methods of searching and retrieving information. This is a very basic understanding of web archiving and web history as well. And at the next stage, the students consider the cases of web history projects, try to understand the methodology and methods for collecting and analyzing data. They discuss the research results of some considered cases. And the course has a strong project orientation in its structure. And for example, there is a task at this intermediate level, and the task called imaginary research, which devoted to the planning of a large scale project and consideration of the main stages of historical research and digital criticism. Then at the third level, the students conduct the individual research project, presenting the project orally and writing a blog post for the course website. There is an issue of small-scale research projects to be considered in the framework of the course as a case studies. The journals and the specific literature focuses on large-scale or complicated projects, which is not so easy to be implemented during the educational course. That's why the students' projects are sort of accessible and even unique, being published on the website, and also the blogs are able to inspire other students, first of all, to raise interesting research tasks, and analyze archived web. And instead of the conclusion, I would like to say that to support the students and to boost their interest in the research of web history, I have written the first handbook in Russia on web history, which will be issued by the end of this year. It will be put in open access as a PDF file. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we go over to from Siberia to Brazil. Moises, are you ready with your presentation? Can you share it with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. The floor is yours, Moises.
Great. Jane, can you share my presentation, please?
Sorry, I thought I had shared it. I will try again.
I think it's just put in full screen, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Great, thank you. And so, hi everyone, hi kids. First, I have to say you say my surname better than me, because my surname is German, a German surname. You say better than me. And it's a pleasure to meet you again here. Thank you for sharing this session. This year we have had the opportunity to meet twice, I think, at the Internet and Preservation Consortium conference and today. And unfortunately, we never met in person, but at least not for now, but it's pandemic times. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you also to Professor Jenny Winters, who I had contact with before this event. Thank you to Professor Neil Brugger and to other organizations. Next, please. So first, a little about us. I act as Professor of Information Science, and I work also with Digital Humanities here. And I lead this research group together with my colleagues and students. This research group, it's about web archiving and digital preservation, was created to investigate the characteristics of a web archive through national and international initiatives, dealing with both the policies and the technologies involved in the process. We started studying web archiving as a research group in 2017. And since then, we thought about how to begin web archiving projects and studies with these digital collections. This is our website. Have information in Portuguese and English. Next, please. We produced several research during this time, since 2017, from preservation of institutional domains, content of social media, and mapping of audience. And here are some of our publications. Next, please. So the theme here is digital preservation in countries that do not have or are only beginning to develop a web archive. It's our case. We don't have any initiative, a national initiative, to preserve our domain. Here is an abstract of this presentation. So much said about web archiving, where several organizations do the digital preservation. But the fact is that many countries still do not have legislation or applied resources to preserve their websites and domains. This presentation will bring the advances we have had in recent years in Brazil in this field, and what is still needed to do to preserve the .br domain and promote the use of web archives by researchers and the general public. Just a contest. Brazil has more than 4 million unique records in the .br domain, and these domains are not under a preservation program with a broad scope. Next, please. I have some considerations about this process. I think about, illustrate the different stages we have in digital preservation and web archiving. So this process happens in a similar way with archival documents and digital archival documents, research data, and so on, with some specificities for web archives. Next, please. It all starts with the awareness, in your case, that information on the web will not be available forever. We can refer to digital dark age, as Windsurf said, or take back our data, as Tim Berners-Lee said, or based on statistical data in how much information we lost after 1 year of the original publication, or even in the structure of the web itself, which was not designed to last forever. We have problems with link rot, proprietary platforms. We have not guaranteed that there will always be a server available with the data we want. There is always the risk we need to manage. The important thing is that we need a clear discourse for awareness. And this is not easy, because people believe that once information is on the web, it will always be available. I think this belief exists in many countries. What are we doing what we're doing in terms of awareness? Next, please. So first, many lectures and events online because of the pandemic, but it has helped us to reach distant part of our countries, our huge country, and with these lectures and webinars, we can reach many people. We work to raise awareness of the importance of digital preservation and web archiving. Second, we are articulating for the legal deposit of the web to be a law, assisting in the discussion of a bill in this sense. Third, we are articulating with national institutions the creation of technical groups to think about policies and requirements for preserving government websites. And fourth, we are doing our homework, of course. In March of this year, our dean approved and published a digital preservation policy for university, including web archiving. Once the initial difficulties overcome, we need to continue the process. This will go through web crawling, digital preservation, and use and reuse of web archives. Next, please. And what we are doing about web archiving activities? We captured the 2008 Brazilian elections. We do the web archiving in the next election, 2022. And today, 85% of original websites of this election from 2018 are offline. In April of last year, we started capturing news related to pandemic in Brazil. Also, last year, we started capturing websites related to climate change in Brazil. And this year, we started capturing our institution websites with the aim to create a web archiving of the university. We preserve all these web archives in our servers at the university. And our next challenge is to make it accessible to use and reuse, respecting copyright, privacy, and data protection in your country. Next, please. That's it. And I have to be here in the World Digital Preservation Day, talking about digital preservation. It's amazing. It's an amazing country. Sorry. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to show you our work. I want to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moses. That's really, really interesting. And now let's go over to Italy, to Chiara. Chiara.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
can
you,
hear you.
Jane. Thank you, Jane, and the organization for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this panel and to share the Italian experience in web archiving. So let's start. I share my screen. Okay. Okay. I would like to start with a very short summary of the state of the Italian digital legal deposit and web archiving law. In 2004, the legal deposit law was extended to cover documents that were disseminated through computer networks. In 2006, the implementing regulation redefined digital documents and set the priorities for their deposit and harvesting. That is, documents that ensure the continuation of existing collections, for example, serials no more published in a traditional way, documents concerning scientific research published by universities, research centers, cultural institutions, and so on, documents published by public administrations and companies, and documents published on websites that are updated frequently or with many citations. It seemed obvious in 2006, the attention was focused especially on digital documents, also being produced in traditional form, such as e-books, e-journals, and in traditional formats, such as PDF, EPUBs, documents sometimes published on the web. But they were focused neither for websites themselves, nor for media and formats typical of the web, like social media, video and photo sharing platforms, audio, and so on. In any case, the digital legal deposit in Italy has not yet been made mandatory because the implementing regulation of 2006 established that the deposit procedures will be provided in a future technical regulation, not yet published. However, the same article of the law of the 2006 expected a pilot project for the digital legal deposit, hosted and managed by the two national central libraries of Florence and Rome, which are the national archives for legal deposit. Since 2010, the National Central Library of Florence, with the institutional collaboration of the National Central Library of Rome and the National Library Marciana of Venice, but using only its own resources, developed the National Digital Legal Deposit project called Magazzini Digitali, that means digital stacks in Italian, that collects PhD dissertations and e-book and e-journals of publishers and universities who have voluntarily joined the program. In 2006, the National Library of Florence had done a crawling of the all.it domain in collaboration with the Internet Archive. But only in 2018, the National Library started a permanent web archiving service using the Archive It platform, thanks to a special grant that they received. To date, we periodically harvest about 300 websites of cultural interest according to the criteria of the Digital Legal Deposit Law, published by institutions and associations who give us their consent to do so. And today, the archived website, the archived websites are organized in 9 public access collections in Archivit. From 2018 to 2020, the National Library of Florence employed a 4-people team of external librarians to select websites, to contact website managers, and to add bibliographic metadata at the seed and single document level. Unfortunately, now web archiving at the National Library is a sort of one-person service who can spend a few hours a week curating website collections, and of course that person is me. Now, the lack of legal regulation for web archiving poses two kinds of issues, I guess. One about resources and funds finding and management, and another about collections development. First of all, no web archiving law means libraries have neither a legal mandate nor permanent human resources and funds that could allow long-term planning. But in the other hand, if libraries had a legal mandate for web archiving, the government had to revise the skills required to the library staff substantially, and to provide for a recruitment and specialist training plan. In September 2021, took place the first summer school on web and social media archiving in Italy, promoted by the University of Bologna and the National Central Library of Florence, which represent the first initiative in Italy to bring this argument in the academic environment and professional training. And now the National Library of Florence promotes a postgraduate internship program on web archiving. Then the lack of a legal mandate causes the problem of library authority and trustworthiness in the web archiving field. Libraries don't have the bargaining power with the content suppliers or platforms like social media platforms and so on. Moreover, libraries have to give at any time reassurance to content suppliers about copyright and accessibility policies, even if the use or reuse of the contents and documents published on the web are problems that concern the live web more properly than the archive one, which has accessibility issues instead. Then, like in law, the collection development criteria are the sole responsibility of the librarians. Librarians have, without any doubt, a long experience in resources selection and organizations, but web resources pose new challenges. Therefore, national guidelines are needed to establish where the web ends, to reduce the margin of appreciation and to guarantee democracy principles in selecting resources for the long-term preservation and access. We also need more practical and technical criteria for selecting resources, because not all published on the web has to be archived through web archiving procedures. For example, digitized cultural heritage collections or huge databases of videos, photos, and so on could be preserved in a more efficient way than web archiving. Therefore, we need to establish national policies and strategies on the preservation of digital heritage. At the end, I would like to make a brief mention of the projects in progress and the further perspectives. This autumn, we will start a virtual lab in collaboration with the Italian Library Association and Rete delle Reti, a network of Italian public libraries, with the aim to build a workflow to create community history web archives, experimenting a cooperation model between the National Central Library of Florence and public libraries. The inspiration comes from the experience of creating a collaborative collection about the coronavirus pandemic in the world. And we would like to hope that the tragedy of coronavirus could become an opportunity for the web archiving in Italy, not only to find new cooperation models, but also to rethink the national digital preservation and web archiving strategy, and to build infrastructures to train librarians and archivists, supported by the European Recovery Fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faria. And before we go to our last speaker, I want to say that if any questions, put them in the chat. Okay, please come forward. Is Arif here?
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Hi,
hi, how are you? Shall I get started then?
yes, you can start. Yes. Floor is yours. Do you have a PowerPoint?
Thank you. I do. Just one moment. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay. So thanks, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this meeting. It's much appreciated. So my name is Arif Shaun. I work for the Qatar National Library as a senior digital curation specialist, and I'm going to talk about the web archiving project by the Qatar National Library. And here's some of the things I'd like to cover in the next I don't know, 10 minutes or so. So let's begin with a very brief history of the library and its mission and vision, because it's important to kind of set the context for the library's motivation for getting involved in such work. In case you aren't aware, the Qatar National Library, as far as I know, is the newest national library in the world. At least it was when it opens its door to the public back in March 2018. But of course, as you can imagine, the work to actually put establish the library had been going on for quite some time, since the 2008. And building this library is one of many endeavors by the country, by Qatar, to sort of help its economy sort of transition from its heavy reliance on oil and gas reserves towards more knowledge base, to ensure sustained progress in future. So here's a quick peek at the library building. It's one of the places to visit. So if you're ever in the country, I invite you and I welcome you there. Please do check it out. But more importantly, the vision of the library is to establish itself as a sort of a center of excellence, or a knowledge hub, if you will, for all things related to learning, research, and culture. And it aims to do so by capturing, preserving, and safeguarding the nation's documentary heritage, and also enabling the discovery of and accessibility to it, not just for current generations of users, but also the future generations of users. So as you can imagine, the capturing the wealth of knowledge that exists on the web in terms of web-based resources, fits right within the remit of the library. Now let's try and understand the library's perspective, or rather rationale for doing this work, which is not dissimilar to what we've already heard. As you were, there's a wealth of knowledge and information that gets published on the web, pretty much every day. Granted, not some of it, not all of it is great. So not all of it, all of the information warrants preservation, and especially some of the things you see on the social media. But that aside, there's a lot of information that gets published in a non-traditional way, not within the structure of a traditional journal article or even research data set. And a lot of this information has value in terms of social, political, cultural, and also scholarly context, and they do warrant extra care and preservation. Of course, we have the example of the pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of the information that got published on the web that probably needed to be captured and preserved. But another example that I'd like to share with you, which is actually very closer, very more relatable from Qatari perspective, is the amount of information and the type of information that was being published on daily basis during the 2017's political unrest in the Middle East, which is often referred to as the blockade of Qatar by its neighboring countries. So during that time, a lot of information, ranging from decisions by the governments, from news from the world leaders and so on, was being published on the web. and it's very important to capture this information, not just for the purpose of providing a very detailed account of what transpired during the time, but also to sort of contribute to the nation's documentary heritage. So it's really important to capture that kind of information. And as you're aware that the risk associated with this kind of information is that they're fundamentally they're web pages. As you know, the websites and web pages are inherently dynamic and transient. So without extra care, they often disappear. And the risks are even higher for Arabic content because they're largely underrepresented in the if you look around the world, the web archives and databases around the world. So the library assumes a responsibility to preserve this kind of content as part of its operational remit. So that was the main motivation for undertaking the web archiving project. Well, I'll talk about in a minute. But the groundwork for this project was actually laid out quite early on in 2015. At the time, library, the library building is still being developed, and it's still the library itself hadn't been granted the National Library status. But the library was participating in a number of these projects to sort of build its capacity, and one of which was this project called Electronic Library Institute -CAQ. I don't remember what CAQ meant, but the project acronym is LSQ. And this was a collaboration between the library, the Qatar National University, Qatar University, and the primary or the main research funding body, Qatar National Research Fund. And together, these institutions collect around a few million, more than a million Arabic and English documents. But more importantly, what this project did, it kind of provided an insight into the importance of the work, but also a sort of a sense of the capacity that the library would need to have to do this work, as a national library in future. So the web archiving project, it sort of aimed to build on this. And it officially commenced in January 2017. And the objective of this project was beyond just collecting websites and web pages, but more to sort of establish a sustainable web archiving infrastructure, which could then enable the library to do this in a sort of sustained and manner over the long term. And the project actually adopted a very curation-focused approach towards both selection of the websites and the web pages that would be crawled, but also for the actual crawling of it. So there were 9 different categories of websites that were identified, ranging from education research to children-related websites. But also the project sort of considered 2 different crawling approaches. One would be crawling the entire domain, and the other would be sort of more theme-based and topic-based, so where some website would publish, for instance, information related to the pandemic within a certain section. So the crawling would then go on sort of capture only those pages rather than the entire domain. So those are the different approaches that were considered. So as I mentioned, the project commenced in 2017. But unfortunately, it was prematurely suspended into September 2017. I'll tell you what it about. It's partially due to the lack of legal deposit, but there's more to it than that. So I'll come back to it in a couple of slides. But let me give you an overview of the amount of work that was done during this time. So during the project. So the first thing we did was to actually develop policy, because it was deemed very important to have a policy to find an optimum balance between what the library is capable of doing and what was actually expected of it by its stakeholders. So it's very important to do that right at the outset. And then 200 websites were selected under 9 different categories that I mentioned. The technical infrastructure was designed and partially implemented in test and production environments. I'll come back to it in the next slides. But more importantly, 20% of these websites were crawled, and which resulted into approximately 200 gigabytes of data in your standard WARC files, which were then packaged and prepared into ingest packages for the purpose of digital preservation. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute as well. So that was basically the quick summary of the work that was done. But just to take a closer look at the system architecture that was built, it kind of looks like this. So on the left-hand side, what you have is the web crawling environment, which mainly consists of a web crawler like Heritrix, So we ended up going for Heritrix because it's open source and it kind of integrated nicely with some of the other systems that we had in place. But the Heritrix in our case was integrated with a set of custom processes and scripts, which is mostly written in Python. And they were responsible for sort of not only just coordinating and managing the crawling jobs, but also for extracting metadata for completed crawls, so that submission information packages for the purpose of digital preservation could be constructed. So what happens is that once the crawling is completed, the work files and the metadata and the thumbnails would go into some kind of a staging area from where it would then be ingested into the digital preservation system. And the access copies of these would go into our digital repository so that it could be discoverable and accessible. Copies of the work files would also go into a version of the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. We went for the open Wayback Machine sort of the solution, and there's an integration between the digital repository and the Wayback Machine, so that the idea is that if a user and a patron search for a web page, whether it's based on domain or some topic or theme, they would then find it and they'd actually be able to play it. They would actually be able to navigate to the web page directly from within the digital repository. So that was the rationale. There are also plans to integrate with the library systems, in particular the catalog and the one-stop search or the single search, however you want to call it. That didn't happen, but that was more or less the kind of architecture. And the overall sort of the goal was to cater to a wide range of users, from individual researchers or general members of the public to institutions, government agencies, and so on. So that was pretty much the system architecture. Now let's talk about why we were prematurely we had to prematurely suspend the project, which is, yes, it's partly due to the legal deposit. I mean, if we had it, then obviously would have been much easier. But the main challenge was the Qatari copyright law, which is the official name is the Law Number 7 of 2002 on the protection of copyright and neighboring rights of Qatar. And the clause in particular within this law, which is called the Article 21, is the culprit. So basically, it makes statements about, it talks about, the scope of the library, of a library in terms of copying works and so on, but excludes all collective works from being reproduced and disseminated by a library. So that's the deal breaker there. Of course, it makes no statements about, the archival of such material. Now, there is a lot of ambiguity around it. I mean, it doesn't really specifically address websites, but if you look at the definition of the collective work, it could be interpreted as, inclusive of websites and so on. So we did for a while toy around the idea of sort of, playing around this ambiguity and just, carried on with the work, but it was deemed inappropriate, at least strategically inappropriate for an organization of Qatar National Library's repute. So we wanted to do it the proper way. So proper way, first thing we considered was that, some of the things we've heard before is that seeking permissions from the owners of the websites, which proved to be a bit of a dead end. So after numerous attempts, we only got one reply, and it wasn't one of the high-profile websites that we wanted anyway. So it proved onerous and and highly ineffective. So it was a dead end. So then we decided to do it in a proper way, which is to basically commit to work with the ministry and the government agencies to bring about some reforms to the Article 21, which should then allow us to actually do the work. So we engaged an independent expert in IP and copyright to make certain recommendations to the ministry. And this has been an ongoing effort as part of the library's effort to acquire the legal deposit status. And we're hopeful that, sooner rather than later, we'd be able to, would be cleared and we'd be able to resume the work that we commenced in 2017, but unfortunately had to suspend it. So just quickly, it's doing the web archiving is pretty much it's an important part of the library's operational remit, and it's a very good opportunity for the library to establish itself to sort of further its course to becoming a sort of a knowledge hub for the Middle East for all things related to intellectual property, scholarship, and so on. But as I said, without the reforms to the Article 21, unfortunately there's no way forward. But once that happens, once we're cleared, the library aims to do more than just archiving and sort of preserving and enabling access to it. But it very much commits to engaging with IIPC, members of IIPC, and other members of the international communities to not just sort of benefit from the wealth of expertise they have, but also to sort of contribute back, so it becomes a sustainable endeavor by the library, and that is one of the goals there. So yeah, so unfortunately no good news, but this is something we started, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in future. So that's pretty much it. So thank you for listening, and here's the links to some of the things I mentioned. If you're interested, you can check out this notorious law number 7 2002 on Qatari media and copyright. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Arif. And I want to thank all four presenters, because it's incredible. It's a really shame, I think, for me. I mean, we are talking about 4 big countries with incredible rich digital heritage, and for all of you 4, what I see is how much you work, and you're actually small WARCnet groups in yourself. I mean, you all are involved with digital preservation, with doing research, with legal issues, with trying to get students interested with publishing. So that's really an enormous effort, and I really hope that we as a WARCnet group can also support you in all of this great work. So it was really informative, and now we get